This is Diana.
And this is Diana.
Chisme con propósito, porque si vamos a hablar, vamos a decir algo.
Si venimos por el chisme,
pero nos quedamos por el crecimiento.
Porque hablar se nos da,
pero reflexionar también.
Because if we're gonna talk, we're gonna say something.
Hello, buenos días. Diana, ¿cómo estás?
Good morning, everyone. I am doing well. Aquí tempranito empezando el día.
I know. Oh my God. We said, let us know, y'all, if we sound better because we're recording in the morning and we usually record in the evening.
Yeah, we're switching it up. I feel like in the mornings it has last week was something else because we did half and half. But I do feel like in the morning we're a bit better.
Sí, because we're having our cafecito, entonces nos da más energía, so let us know what y'all think. But yeah, we're surviving. Mercury retrograde is almost ending, so I cannot wait. I'm not making any like life decisions or any type of decisions until after the 23rd.
23rd, yeah. So after
Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah, this I feel like this one for me, it has just felt like such a drag. Every day
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like it's so hard to get up. And like I mean once we're up and doing stuff like I'm fine, right? But it just has felt heavy. Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. It feels very exhausting. I know we were just talking about this yesterday. We're like, it's the beginning of the week y se siente como si es the end
El
of the
fin
week.
de yeah, yeah. Ya
Yeah.
listas para el fin de semana.
Sí, listas,
I know.
listas. But let's go into our weekly chisme. So I was going to talk about this event that I worked on Saturday that was very heartwarming. But you
Mhm.
know what? I'll talk about the date that I went on Sunday because I totally forgot about
Ooh.
that. But as you all know, Diana and I went to speed dating a couple weeks ago, and I ended up
Mhm.
matching with like one of the guys that I met. And so we went to go have dinner on Sunday, and it was actually really nice, but
Mm.
also very just like scary. I feel like I'm
Mhm.
not used to going on dates with people that I don't have like a previous like relation or connection with. And
Mhm.
it was a little, like, nerve-wracking because I was like, "Oh my god, like, I don't know." Like, I just feel very
Mhm.
uncomfortable. So I think it's, like, teaching me to just, like, be okay with being
The
uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
and that, like,
Mhm.
the feeling is temporary. But I think it went well. I don't know if, like, I see a future or anything, but I'm trying to, like, give myself, like, grace and, like, space and just, like, try to get to know the guy a little bit more. But no, it was really good. He, like, sent me the directions, like, he was like, "I can pick you up, or if you wanna drive yourself there, like, you can park here."
I
So
love that.
yeah, so I was like, "Oh my god, I love a guy who's just, like, thoughtful." You can
Yes, and
there are men.
communicates.
Yes, dude, it was great. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my weekly chisme, so I'll keep y'all posted, a ver qué
Aw.
onda.
Aw, I love that. I love that you're getting out there and trying. You inspire us all.
I see. It could be you too, but you're queen.
Not yet, not yet. I'm okay right now. All right.
Mm,
My cheesemate is it's not really a spicy one. I feel like I kept thinking like what happened to me this week. I feel like this past week was like, it was all right. But I did dive deep into true crime this past week. And I me aventé like two different a series on Netflix. It was the worst roommate ever and then the worst ex ever. Some of these
oh my god.
stories were insane, like insane. And I was like, I would never let that happen. I would never let that happen. But
We
like
all say
some
that.
I know, but I do feel like you are sometimes so deep in that like you don't realize how deep in and bad it is, and then to get out of it is crazy. Like some of these people, and it's both like men and women, or even well, actually not even just men and women, but like just you know just relationships in general, like when it came to the worst ex ever, some of these like even led to like deaths in the family and like killings and murders, and then there's kids involved, which makes it that much worse. And a lot of I think what I walked away was that a lot of these like women, because they're being interviewed obviously like years after, the
Yeah.
experience and what they went through, And I think it brought me back to even, like, some of, like, my conversations, like, with Isaura in the beginning when I started therapy, how, like, we see the red flags in the beginning. Like, we
Mhm.
see patterns, we see their way of, like, talking, communicating, right? The way that they interact, that they act around you, around others, yet we, like, just turn away and don't look at it, right? Because we're so interested in them, or like we feel the butterflies in our stomach, or we love them, so we're gonna stick through. But
Yeah.
it's like the flags are there from the beginning. And a lot of these, like, people that spoke up, because it was both like, men, women that were talking about it, and how like they saw it in the beginning, but they stuck through. And then like the end result, like some people went crazy, Diana. Like, I'm talking like stalking, like going in and like threatening with like guns and like knives. It was crazy. I was so deep into it. Like, I watched like the whole series. And then for like the worst roommate ever, it was just a lot of episodes on like just people like squatting and not wanting to leave and taking over like the households. And like, I think one that really got to me was a story of an older lady in the, Coachella Valley,
Uh-huh.
and I learned how, out there is, like, a lot of, like, retired, people, right? A
Yeah.
lot of, just older, um, individuals that have, like, their homes, and they end up having to, like, rent out, like, a bedroom, just to be able to pay off the house or the bills or whatever, and how they take advantage of that, and they took over, like, their home, and then through all of that interaction, she ended up getting, like, murdered by the roommate. I know, it was insane. I
Mm.
was like, "Oh my god." But
You
I
know, it just always makes you think, like, it could be worse.
it could be worse, definitely, it could be worse, but I do recommend those if you're into true crime, 'cause I am, I do like, watching that. And then I did also watch this documentary on the 43, that disappeared from a
Oh,
Yoni
Ayotzinapa.
Napa. Yeah, highly recommend that one. I hadn't seen it because I feel like sometimes I'm not ready to watch those type of documentaries, but it was really good, and I feel like it sheds light on, like, what actually happened, and how just the Mexican government, like El Peña Nieto, really covered it all up. So, recommend that one too.
Damn.
So that was me, that was my last week.
Wow, busy, busy, busy. When you're talking about the worst ex ever, I was like, "Oh my god, perfect documentary for my ex." Um, but I definitely agree with what you're saying where it's like, a lot of times, like, we excuse, like, their behavior or we're like, "Oh, nomás es porque están pasando un mal rato," or
Mhm,
like, "This isn't
mhm.
who they are." And yeah, like Isaura always says, like, people show you exactly who they are. I just think that, like, sometimes, like, we choose to ignore it.
Yep.
So, that's on us.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the news today, we've been talking about the World Cup. Sadly,
Ooh.
has come to an end.
Ya, ya se
Uh,
acabó.
no, ya se acabó, se fue, se fue. So yeah, Argentina lost and the Spanish colonizers won. I
Mm.
think that we could really have a whole just like segment on kind of like the feelings that were brought up during like this World Cup.
Mhm.
Um, it was the game, honestly, I personally felt like it was like very weak in terms of just like Argentina. I feel like they were not
Yeah.
really playing. I would like
No.
see Messi just like walking. I wouldn't even try to run. I was like,
He
"Are
just
you even
wants the
trying?"
ball. Sí, nomás quiere que le lleguen las pelotas para meterlas, dude.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, Spain, I feel like they really, they do pobrecitos, they were, like, flying. Argentina was so aggressive, like, I
Yes.
did not realize that they played like that. I didn't know
Yeah.
soccer was, like, a contact sport.
I don't think it's supposed to be, but I guess with them, it has always been, and I think we talked about this in our last episode, how, like, all of their games have been so controversial. I feel like
Mhm.
something always comes up, and this last game was intense. I mean, they went all the way through the extra times, right? And then
Yeah.
it was in the second extra time, right, that, Spain, like, scored. And then leading up to all of that, I feel like there was so much that came up, a lot of, like, shoving and pushing, and then
Mhm.
some of it was being called out by the referee, but not all of it, and I feel like that's what we saw in a lot of, like, their games. But I think for me, and we were talking about this, like, it just wasn't really good sportsmanship on their part. Like, the
100%, yeah.
fact that when they, they, gave them, like, the medals, right, and then, like, the trophy and everything, and they turned their backs to the team, to the Spain team, like, that's so disrespectful. It's like, have some, I don't know, just, like, you learn how to lose, like, you lost.
Yeah.
Take it. It's okay. Some win, some lose, but they didn't. They did not know how to lose. And then I was reading that I guess they when they left like the stadium, they walked through the back to avoid like all of the media. So they didn't even like talk to any like media or news reporters. Like they avoided them completely.
Yeah, it's just, it's really unfortunate because they, they're representing like their country. And of course, like,
Mhm.
no one is ever happy to lose. But I think, like you said, I think it shows like good sportsmanship. I think like en la vida, like siempre se toca de ganar y perder, and like they lost. But even like at the end of the game, yeah, when they had announced, that Spain had won, like, that clip of, like, one of the Argentina players literally, like, shooting
Yes.
out his hand and basically, like, getting him, like, trying to choke, like, the Spain
Mhm.
player. It was just I was like, "Why? Like, why are you doing
So
that?"
unnecessary.
Just yes, like, so unnecessary, so aggressive. Yeah, it was just honestly kind of disappointing just the way that, like, the Argentino
Mhm.
players acted. And, my boss is from Argentina, so I'm always, like, saying, like, "Not all Argentinos are like that," because my boss is really great and really nice. But I think it's unfortunate that because of the way that they were acting, it's kind of created this idea of, like, how Argentinos are.
Yes, very much, and I feel like I mean, social media has also added to that narrative, like that journalist, right, that spoke and said that he hated Mexicans, and
Okay,
then
I
I feel
need you
like
to send me that clip because I
Mhm.
can't find it.
Okay, I will send it to you because I feel like it always pops up on my feed. And then later, like the next day or so, or a few days after, he came out apologizing. But I think all of that and then a lot of the clips, on social media just add on to that narrative of like, you know, um, I don't know, this like tension between like Argentinos and Mexicanos and all these, other like countries as well. So it was definitely a game. Did we wish Mexico would have been there? Of course. We're like, "Damn, that could have been us. That could have been
They were there in spirit. They were there in spirit.
Yeah. But I guess now we're we're talking about like, well, what do we follow now? Like, what are we gonna watch? I guess we go back to the Dodgers because they are still playing, so that's an
I
option.
guess. I'm gonna try to get into the Liga MX, a ver qué onda. Everyone says that the girlies need to be Chivas fans, and La Hormiga plays for the Chivas,
Damn.
so I don't know, perhaps. We'll see. Stay tuned.
I I feel like for the longest, I would
Don't
say
tell me you're an
I don't
America
really I really wouldn't even watch it, but I would say that I was America
fan.
because Ochoa was part of that team, and I was like, I'm supporting Ochoa, not necessarily America. But now that he's retired, I feel like I need a new team to to say
Yeah.
that I go for.
Ay,
Yeah.
Diana, I can't.
Okay. Well, what else is going on? There's a heat wave in
Mhm.
LA. Well, I guess through other all of like Southern California, but it's super hot, y'all. Like the summer is here. Like in some areas it's like the 90s, and some other areas like over 100. I have
So bad.
definitely felt it. Yeah.
No, and I don't know if, like, this is happening in LA, because even though I live in LA, I work in OC, right? So I spend,
Mhm.
like, 40 hours of my freaking week in the Orange
Mhm.
County area. It's been so humid out here, like, it's been hot
Mm.
and humid, and it's so gross,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "This is not giving, like, LA summer or SoCal summer."
I feel like I haven't felt the heat humid. I think it's been more
No,
like a dry kind
I
of,
know.
yeah, heat, but we have definitely been blasting our ACs because it's hot, yeah, I can't, ya no puedo. But if you do need to stay cool, know that there are public libraries that are open. There's a lot of like community centers as well, so you can utilize those spaces. I know myself, last week I went like a few times in the morning to work from like coffee shops, and I'm like, let me take advantage of these spaces here. So
Yeah, no, see.
they're creative. Yeah.
And then we also have an update on the lineage fires. So there's been over 1,000 resident air complaints because, as we've mentioned before, the lineage like storage facility had food.
Mhm.
And so with the fire and stuff, there was just like a ton of like rotting food that had to be removed. Uh,
Mhm.
but still, like, the smell is really bad, and I know, Diana, you were mentioning, right, that, like, I haven't been in the area, but you were mentioning that the smell is like, que huele.
It does smell. So when I go to drive to work, there's like a small stretch that I along like the 5, you can smell it, and I think with the heat, like, the smell has just, like, gotten really bad, so you can smell it, like, it's really bad, and if I'm smelling it just driving on the freeway, like, you can imagine what it's like for those that are living, like, around, the community. So there's a lot that's still, happening because they're still removing a lot of, like, the rotten food, like, the rats, the flies are still there. There was, like, 2, 3 weeks ago, there was, like, a town hall meeting, and, like, a lot of the community, did go to protest, because I think what's happening is that they're not responding quickly. I think if it was like
Mm.
another community, they would have like already evacuated them and given them much more resources that have been provided now. And I think that's what the community is saying. Like, because it's a Latino community, it's sort of like being like forgotten. And I know that we had a Padilla come down, I think this week. He
Oh,
was
yeah,
like out
yeah.
there as well. I'm kind of taking a look. So it does say we did learn, right, that they were going to have like a 45-day cleanup. But I mean, 45 days, that means that 45 days is what, like a month and a half.
A month and
That
a half,
means
yeah.
45 days of like people, right, in the community, residents that are unable to breathe like comfortable, clean air, or even like allow the kids to play outside. So yeah, that is a whole disaster that I feel like it's going to take a lot of time to recuperate from, and yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah, so stay tuned for that, y'all. Another thing that y'all might have seen is that the US government issued a final rule ending duration of status for international students, setting a 4-year maximum stay limit, cutting post graduation grace periods to 30 days, and requiring federal extension approvals effective September 15. So, this is adding strict limits to student visas and restricting how international students transfer school or change their study plans, um,
Mhm.
which again is like a issue in and of itself, right? Because, for
Mhm.
example, I think, like, a lot of international students usually will go to a community college, they'll
Mhm.
be there for about 3 years, and then they
And then
transfer to, like,
transfer.
a university, and sometimes that takes 2 to 3 years, so, like, a
Mhm.
4-year timeline basically makes it kind of impossible, I think, for a
Mhm.
lot of students to be able to, like, complete, and this is just talking about undergraduate degrees, right? What if a student wants to pursue a graduate degree, such as,
Graduate
like, a
PhD
master's or
pro
a PhD program? Um, yeah.
Yeah, this one is huge. I feel like it's gonna have an impact on like student enrollment across universities because one, I mean, even though within like California, right, a lot of institution like the UCs, right, the CSUs, they have like a dedication, right, to enroll California residents, but we do have a lot of out of state students as well as international students that enroll in the universities, and they add to the diversity, right, of like the student body, just the alternate views that they bring. And they also contribute heavily to the colleges like financials because these students do not qualify for federal aid. So they're paying like 100% out of pocket unless, they find like a scholarship. So this is huge, and I think since I, like, work with, like, transfer students, like, it's gonna
Yeah.
be I feel like it's gonna come up because, like you said, we do see a lot of these students at the community colleges spending 2 to 3 years because they whether they have to take, like, different English classes, right, or math courses, get placed, and then be able to take the actual courses that prepare them to transfer, and then after transferring, having, like, a strict, timeline of by when they can stay. I think it's gonna be we're gonna see, like, a ripple effect of this, so that's what your president is doing, y'all, with this whole immigration crackdown.
Yeah. Está crítica la situación, pero
Mhm.
we'll see. Stay tuned, you. I think it's definitely I feel like, especially with this current presidency, I think that there's a lot of things happening in the back end when it comes to, like, education and higher ed. And I think because
Mhm.
we work in these spaces, we're definitely going to see, like, the impacts that it has, not just financially, right, in terms of, like, the money that the universities and colleges are getting from the federal government, but also the services that we can be providing to students. I don't know if you saw, like, an article that they were saying that, like, the federal government cut certain grants and that they
Mhm.
use specific words in the grants, like words like diversity, equity,
Mhm.
and those were the grants that they, like, cut off.
Yeah, it's very intentional. Very
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
I
Okay,
know.
well, on to better things, or I guess more fun things than our current state of the world. Today's segment, we really wanted to talk just about Latino culture and the way that it's like consumed, right?
Mhm.
Especially when it becomes trending. So, what are your thoughts on this, Sienna?
I well, first, I feel like we have to give, like, a little shout out to our producer because this episode, topic did come from her because she shared, like, um, a TikTok, with us of just how we see, like, our culture, right, and, like, how brands, represent us here versus, like, over in Mexico, and, like, this idea, that we keep kind of, like, sort of like holding on to the Mexican culture, right, through like our parents' like lens and this idea
Mhm,
of like preserving our culture, right? But it's like if you think of like Mexico, like it's modernizing, right? Like there's a lot of changes when it comes to like fashion, architect, like the arts, right? And many other things. So this came out of that, so a huge shout out to her.
yes,
But when it
yes.
comes to, Latino culture, I think one of the things that we, wanted to, kinda talk about is just how it's, like, represented, right? And this idea that, Mexico is modern and not just, like, traditional, and like I said, I think sometimes we hold on to what we know because of, like, our parents, right? But there's a lot of like thriving tech startups, like world class universities,
Mhm.
architecture, a lot of like innovative like businesses happening within like Mexico. And it's more than just, I feel like when we think of Mexico, we think of like the pueblos, the ranchos, and the mercados, but that's obviously that's part of it, but that's one part, right, of like the bigger like story. So um that's what we wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, and I think, you bring up a good point that for a lot of us that are children of immigrants, like we were raised with this idea of like cómo es México y cómo es la
Mhm.
cultura. And while there is some instances where that continues, especially when you think about like the more rural areas, like the pueblos, the
Mhm.
city themselves are very much, like active. And I would even say like more advanced than like here in the US a lot of times.
Mhm.
But I think that it kind of stems from kind of like the conversation specifically in this is the fact that like we are sold this idea of like what we think Mexico is because a lot of brands, want to make money. And I think a lot of us are trying to find ways to like maintain like some semblance of like a connection to like our parents' like country. And so we tend to buy into these like brands and these things that are, kind of selling us like our culture. But then it kind of also makes you think like, okay, but, like, you go to Mexico y te ven como que esta, like, se ve rara,
Mhm.
wearing these, like, type of, like, cultural, like, I feel like, embroidered shirts, right? While there are people that do wear embroidered shirts, like, if you go to Mexico City or if you go to, like, Monterrey, like, no vas a ver a la gente estar caminando con, like, blusas así.
Yeah, very, very much so. I think the whole branding, even around just fashion, even aesthetics, right? Like the
Mhm.
gold hoops, like the cowboy boots and the hat. I feel like right now, like I've seen a lot, like the whole cowboy culture, the boots, the hats, and like everything is huge. Like, I mean, there's a lot of like theme parties, the festivals, right? Is all like around that. And yeah, when you go to Mexico, there are areas where you may see this, but not necessarily all the time, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of like also a lot of this, right? I feel like the community, the Latinos have worn it like for years, right? It's what their tradition and what they've grown up. But then here, I feel like in the US, right, it's very much something embraced as like fashion, right? Or as something like cute, that I want to have that, right? Because it's very like aesthetic or whatever. Um, but this is also the everyday lives of some of these people as well. So I think that's where, is this more of like appreciation or appropriation, right? When it comes to like the culture, and also who's profiting from it. And are we giving credit to the people as well, right? Because I think that also matters. And I think that's where you also have to educate yourself
Yeah.
with a lot of these things.
And I think the other kind of thing that we wanted to touch on, right, is because, Mexican culture is like so to us, right? And it always ties into like consumerism and
Mhm,
capitalism. I guess kind of trying to understand, like, where is that line between like appreciation and
mhm,
appropriation? I feel like I always say, like, well, we're Latinos, so like we can't really be appropriating our own culture. I always have a very hard time kind of like
mhm,
showing the difference. I mean, I think when like, initially, I say, like, well, appreciation is, like, you recognize, like, the history of, where this is coming from. You, like,
mhm.
appreciate, like, the people that have, like, made this. But then, like and, appropriation, I don't know, like, what do you think, Diana, with that?
I don't know. I feel like it's hard because I mean, there is a difference, right? Where you are appreciating like a culture, and then I think another one where you're also like appropriating. And when I think of that, I feel like the first thing that comes into mind is like the Cinco de Mayo. Like that is
Mm,
such
yeah.
a huge, like it's much more celebrated here in the US than over in Mexico. Like I don't even think that's a huge thing, over there. Um it- so I don't know. I think it's hard because I feel like, you can appreciate like a culture like by respectfully like learning about it, right? Giving credit and also supporting the people, right, who created it.
Mhm.
Like for example, I don't know, a lot of people like, learning Spanish because you genuinely want to, learn the Spanish. Or, if you're like you just said, buying like the embroidered clothing, right? Like where are you buying it from? Are you buying it from like a store like Zara, or like directly from someone,
Mhm.
um, like a Mexican like brand, right? Or someone, from like the community. So I think it's more of like how you are appreciating it, right? And then when does it come like that you're appropriating? Is it just to do it because it's like a trend? Are you just like, going to the Cinco de Mayo just to get drunk, right? And do all that. And I feel like a lot
Mhm.
of people do that. I'm not like
Yeah.
talking shit or anything like that, because I think a lot of people do it. But like even like when you think of like Los Dias de los Muertos, like a lot of people paint their face as like a Halloween costume without like understanding like the meaning behind that, right? So I think it boils down to just being like educated and understanding like what you're doing when you're buying something, when you're painting your face, when you're saying things. And then also something that I know like we wrote within like our notes as well, it's like, you can love our food, you can love the music, the fashion, and all of this, but then are you also willing to stand like with the communities, right? Like
Mhm.
when there's all these issues coming up when it comes to like immigration, discrimination, and like even like the voting, right? And everything that happens like within our communities, like I think that's where you can really like show, your support as well, rather than just doing it or because it's trendy, and because I want to be cool.
Yeah, and you know what? You bring up a good point that, like, I guess I hadn't really thought about that, but
Mhm,
yes, because even during the World Cup, that was something that, like, was in the back of my mind when there was, like, so many people that were wearing, like, Mexico jerseys. But then it's like, okay, but where are you when like people, when there's like these raids happening in our community, when like there are people that are saying things about like Latinos, like, when people are getting like murdered, right, in like the streets by these ICE agents. And then
Mhm,
there's people that have like Mexico jerseys, but then they're silent. And I
mhm,
think, like, I know that it's not just like a social media post. I think like another thing is like having the conversation
mhm,
about like the things that are happening in our community. And I think it's like you can't just like wear the culture and not be able to like have a conversation about like the things that are happening like in our community. Um
mhm,
so I think it's, I appreciate you like saying that because I think that is so true. Like part of
mhm,
like appreciating it is having like conversations that affect the very culture that you are like wearing and like, showing off.
mhm. Exactly, yeah. Oh my god, I had a thought as you were talking and then it went away. I know, se me fue. I think I need my coffee. I need my
I know.
I need my cafecito. Um, and then to add on to that, I think as we were thinking of this, something else that came up, it's like growing up, it's but we've talked about like being like first gen, right? And growing up with this. And I it sort of like brought me back how a lot of like what we see now, I think growing up, sometimes we would get teased, right? Or it was even like embarrassing. Well, I don't know if embarrassing for me it was, but like I know sometimes there's like a feeling of embarrassment speaking Spanish in public and the pressure, right, to only speak English. And I think last week, you spoke on how like your brother, only speaks English because that is
Mhm.
what it was like growing up. And I think, thinking through all of that and then where we're at now, it's like all of these things, right, that we were sort of like felt like we're pressured to hide or keep to ourselves and now watching them become like trendy. I think sometimes it's just insane, right, to see how a lot of the things we growing up it was sort of seen like, oh, like that's not cool, or like poor people wear that. And now it's like everyone is wearing it, right, and using it
Mhm.
every day. It's just very like interesting to see that too.
Yeah, and I think, when I like as you're saying this, I think the word that comes to mind is like feeling uncomfortable. Like
Mhm.
feeling uncomfortable to like speak Spanish because
Mhm.
you might get weird looks. And I think like we grew up like in an area that was like predominantly Latino, but nonetheless, right, you were sometimes in spaces where like you had to translate for your mom because the person that your parents were talking to did not speak Spanish, and feeling like a sense of just like discomfort and just like uncomfortable, and
Mhm.
even making you feel kind of like embarrassed because you're like, oh my god, like que
Mhm.
vergüenza que like that like my parents can't speak the language, right? And I think like
Mhm.
we very much grew up in an era where like I think it was, it was kind of like the after effects of like a time when like you were not allowed to speak Spanish in school.
Mhm.
I think,
Mhm.
like, when we were in school, like, you could speak Spanish, but, like, you still had to learn English. So it was kind of like this, like, in between, and I think now what we see a lot is these, like, dual immersion programs, right? Where it's like,
Yes.
oh, like, they speak English and Spanish, right? So now being bilingual is more of, like, an or it's being, like, consumed more as, like, an asset versus, like, like, something that was bad.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, I mean, my nephew, he did all of elementary in a dual language program. It was English and Spanish. So, yeah. And I think a lot of people they're having their kids like early on like learn different like languages. So, very very interesting, y'all.
Yeah, but I think, as, like, the conversation continues, I think that, our kinda goal is just to be mindful, right, about, like,
Mhm.
when we are, like, consuming our culture and where it is that we're consuming it from, and, like, it's not just about, like, wearing the clothes, but also, like, how are you really, like, showing up for, like, your community.
You're supporting. So, do a little bit of research, do some background checks as you are buying things and representing the different cultures and communities. But we hope you enjoy this discussion. Just keeping in mind that culture isn't something that we consume online, but rather it's something that we live like every day through our families, tradition, language, and communities. And we'll continue. I feel like we always kind of like merge different like topics across like all of our episodes. So I'm sure we'll continue talking about this. But with that, we want to say thank you for listening to us. We hope you have a good rest of your day and week, and please share and follow us on social media. We're trying to make a living out of this, y'all. So help support us. Support us.
Please share. Please share. We want to thank you all for listening to Chisme con Propósito,
Where the tea is hot,
the takes are unfiltered,
and somehow we still make it make sense.